In this section, we'll take our first look at actually running a container. I'm going to step you through a few of the podman commands we need to pull down our images and then actually run our container. And we're going to do this using a MySQL image. So, how do we fetch containers? So in order to actually run our containers, we want to have them pulled down and available locally. And the way we can do that is using the podman search command and then the podman pull. So podman search is going to index one of those image registries and look for an image based on our search term. So in this example down here, we are searching for any container that contains rel. So what you're going to do is you're going to configure podman and point it to the registries that you want to have podman search in. So for example, we mentioned the Red Hat Container Catalog, we mentioned Docker Hub, Quay.io. These are all registries that you can configure podman to be using. So we would do a podman search, we'd search for rel, and we see we have found an image here that's available at registry.access.redhat.com/rel. Okay, so if we want to have that available to us, all we would need to do is run sudo podman pull rel, and rel would be downloaded and available for us to create containers from that image. So this is the structure for how images are named. It's just useful to keep in mind. Essentially, it is a combination of the name of the registry, the username that the image belongs to, and then a specific name for that image, and then finally a tag which denotes the version of the image. So for example, and down here we have registry.access.redhat.com/rel. So that's an image name. So that's the repository that the image is coming from, as well as the name of the image itself. And the tag is latest. So latest is the default name. If you don't provide a tag for your image, it's automatically going to be given the tag latest, which usually implies that it's the newest. That's not always the case. It's always smart to tag your images and make sure to give them a version number. It'll just help keep things organized. But example, you would see like if you had a rel 7.6 image, you may see rel and then the tag number would be 7.6. Okay, containers are run by using the podman run command and then by passing in the name of that image. So for example, we would run podman run rel 7, 7.5, and 7.5 specifies the tag number in this instance. And then we could run a command at the end of that run. So for example, this one says hello world. So what that's going to do is it's going to start a container, and it is going to basically be running a very lightweight version of rel 7, and it's going to just run a simple echo hello world. So I mentioned earlier one of the ways I described a container was by saying that it is an isolated process. So one thing to know about a container image is that at the end of a container, you're always specifying what is called the entry point. And the entry point is the process that is running within the container. So if you were to look at, say, a MySQL image, at the end of that image, the last thing you're doing at the entry point is that you are starting the MySQL service. Similarly, in a web application, if you're using an Apache server, the last thing that you're going to see is that you are starting the Apache process. So one of the interesting things about containers is that you are able to override that process if you would like to on the command line when you are running the container. So in this instance, we're using, like I said, the rel 7 image. If that one doesn't have a running process, it'll just default to a typical bin bash -c, so we can pass anything we want in at our entry point. And in this case, we're just running that echo hello world. One other option that's important to know is the -d option. I typically use this a lot because when you're running a container, it's just a long running process. You probably want it to be running in the background. So the -d option is going to put that in the background so that you can have your terminal back. If you don't do this, your terminal is going to be locked up with a process, and if you press Control-C, not only is that container going to stop, but it's going to go away. So the process will end, and then your container will have to be manually restarted. Here are some other important options to know about when using podman. You want to always give your container a name. This name has to be unique. If you don't provide one, one is automatically generated for you, and they're occasionally a little bit embarrassing, to be honest. So it's a good idea, not only because it's more organized, but to save yourself some embarrassment with some awkward names of your containers. We also have the -I and the -T option. So -T stands for pseudo terminal and -I is for interactive. These are almost always used in conjunction with each other, or we often use them in conjunction with each other. These are great for when you need to interact with your container, if you need to have the ability to do like an input-output. If you want to run commands within your container, then you're going to want to use -I and -T. So here's an example of a container run. We're running podman run -IT, rel 7, 7.5. 7.5 is the tag, and then we're running bin bash. So what this is doing is it is creating a container that is based on rel 7. We're running it interactively, and then we are using the bin/bash to override the entry point and to start a bash shell within the container. So those subsequent commands I'm running, ls, who am I, and exit, those are all being run actually within the rel 7 container. So how do we get some information inside of our container? We like to think of images and containers as immutable, but we need to be able to transfer our own information. How do we configure our MySQL server, for example? So one way to do that is by using environment variables. So this looks like very similar to the example we just looked at. We're running podman run. We're taking the name and we're passing in the name of the container that we want to use, in this case MySQL custom. And we are specifying the image name here, MySQL. We're using the tag 5.5. And we're specifying with -E environment variables. So these are the environment variables that are required for us to start the MySQL service correctly. We need to pass in at least the MySQL user and the MySQL password. We're able to do this directly from the command line when we start our container. If we didn't pass these in, our container would probably fail to start. The process would not run properly. Okay, so let's jump right into the demonstration and we'll take a look at creating a MySQL container. Okay, so in this demonstration, I'm going to be running this command here that is going to kick off a new MySQL container based on this MySQL 5.7 rel 7 image. We're going to go inside of the container. We're going to, test it out, make sure that we're able to create a table and, insert some rows, and just demonstrate that we were able to get a fully fledged MySQL service up and running. So in this podman run command, again, this is similar to the example that I just showed you. We're naming the container MySQL basic. We're passing in our environment variables. So these are just specifying who our MySQL user is, the password, the name of the database, and the root password. These are all required parameters for us to provide to start the MySQL service. We're running it in the background using the -D option, and then this is the name of the image that we're using. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so the way we can check to see if our container is running is we can do a podman ps. Okay. So this output is going to give us the container ID, it's going to give us the name of the image, it's going to give us the name of the container, and it'll talk about when it was created, how recently the container was created. Okay, so now that our container is running, we can run podman exec it. This isn't one you've seen before, but I mentioned it earlier. Podman exec is going to allow us to go inside of our running container. The -IT, if you remember, this is our interactive terminal. We're passing in the name of our container, and then we're going to pass in bin bash. So this is going to allow us to open up an interactive shell within the container. Okay, so from here, we're going to use the MySQL command, and we're going to log in as root. Okay, so now we are in our MySQL process, and we're going to do show databases. Okay, remember that we specified the name of our database was items, so we can see here our database items is there. So let's switch over to using that one. And I've got my MySQL create table ready for copying and pasting. Don't worry if you're not really that familiar with SQL commands. This is just to demonstrate that we're able to make changes to our database within our container. So I'm going to create the table projects. Okay, everything looked good there. And let's do a show tables to see that we can see it. All right, we can see projects. And now I'm going to insert a row into that table. insert into projects, ID name code, and we're going to pass in the values 1 DevOps. Oops, I forgot a comma. And then this course code D080. Okay, I think that's right. It's not. Ah, okay, I got it. I have a comma instead of a parentheses. Ah, projects. There we go. All right, third time's a charm. Okay, so then let's run select all from projects. And we can see that our row has been successfully inserted. So let's get out of this MySQL process and let's exit out of the container. And that concludes this demonstration. So join us in the next video and we'll start talking about how to create our own custom images.